Inside is an exhibition of work by international artists and writers. It's inspired by the 2 years that Oscar Wilde spent here. Wilde wrote only one thing whilst incarcerated in Reading jail, and that was a letter that became known as De Profundis.
Dear Bosie, after long and fruitless waiting, I have determined to write to you myself, as much for your sake as for mine, as I would not like to think that I had passed through 2 long years of imprisonment without ever having received a single line from you, or any news or message even, except such as gave me pain.
It's a cell, but without wall. It's a free cell. But you can walk and experiment the space of cell, but without wall. But here you have the door of Oscar Wilde's cell, and here in Reading prison, a lot of memory come here, concentrate here, and the memory, of course, of Oscar Wilde. So it's homage of Oscar Wilde.
It feels haunted. You just can sense the human lives. And it's a very poetic space because there are lots of little traces left of people and their stories, and but only traces, little fragments.
The first very strong impression will be formed by just entering this Victorian prison and seeing and feeling, because I think you feel the place as much as see it.
Different works in different cells.
And then within that, you're inhabiting the prison and you'll come across artworks and writings which also inhabit the cells, often in very deeply personal ways.
There's something of De Profundis and the feelings of sorrow, of pain, of remorse, of self-awareness, of self-revelation, of self-loathing, which each of the works somehow, and the letters, the sculpture installations, speak to in some way. So De Profundis is a kind of anchor.
爱老，在你2岁的时候，我消失了81天。我用这封信告诉你当时发生了什么事情。
All adopted children blame themselves and repeat the rejection, either by doing the leaving or finding that they are the one who is left. And must it repeat over and over till the groove is worn and the print is fuzzy, but the pain is no less? Why is the measure of love loss?
Oh, he's a hero. He's obviously a literary hero because he was a great writer, but he's also a hero for social justice. I never think of him as a victim, though he was a victim of a system, but he was somebody who, his spirit was so strong that he has gone forward into our world and helped us to see both the iniquity and the stupidity of judging someone for the love that dare not speak its name, which was Lord Alfred Douglas's line, not Oscar's, but the idea that you can, that it is a crime to love somebody. And I think one of the things about Oscar is it's not just that we concentrate on sexuality. We look, across gender, across class, across cultural norms. Whether it's women who are being burned under honour killings because they've disgraced their family, whether it's women sold into marriage or prostitution, any situation where love cannot express itself freely, I think is a situation that Oscar Wilde has stood up and spoken out for on behalf of all of us.
Meanwhile, the old white man of politics, like an ancient crocodile, drags its thick tail across the 21st century. They are still with us, fragile but powerful, those who whisper, "I am not saying you are it, but you look like it."
There were about 150 men behind doors in the prison galleries, but when Oscar had walked in and been taken to his cell, he wouldn't have seen any of them, he wouldn't have been aware of any of them. And that's because for 22 hours of 24 of every day, prisoners were locked up alone in their cells. This had originally been called the separate system, and prisoners, as well as being deprived of their liberty, were also effectively deprived of human contact. You were isolated. You came out for a visit to chapel every day, you came out for an hour's exercise every day, but otherwise you were shut behind a door, seeing no one.
I think it's the first time I've been inside a prison, and it's probably true for many of us. And it made me think about how, as a society, we participate in mass incarceration all over the world, and yet most people don't have any idea what that's like. It's something that is part of our kind of consciousness, I suppose, in daily life, and yet we never experience it or never experience it physically. So being here was a real revelation.
If you find one false excuse for yourself, you will soon find 100 and be just what you were before. Do you still say, as you said to Robbie in your answer, that I attribute unworthy motives to you? Ah, you had no motives in life. You had appetites merely. A motive is an intellectual aim.
I think there's something about De Profundis where you feel the immediacy of the pen on the paper. You feel it in the writing. It's just another kind of spirit which is not the considered, the considered turn of phrase. I mean, he has innately a beautiful sense of language, so that's in De Profundis. But you feel the pain and the need, the immediacy of the need to express flows through De Profundis. I think and it's alarming because it feels so present.
The main criteria somehow was to talk with artists and writers who didn't need us to explain to them why we were asking them. That somehow within their own bodies of work, they were involved with issues to do with confinement and separation, the relationship between the containment of the body and the release of the mind.
I think Oscar Wilde is one of the people that has maybe the most quoted person ever, or I don't know, but I mean, there's almost no one who hasn't got one line or something, even if it's got a bit turned around in a funny way, that comes from Oscar Wilde.
What is so great about him as an artist is that he's kind of he's really at this kind of intersection between like the height of romanticism and modernism, and that you sort of really feel both from him, you know. There's both like Andy Warhol and Baudelaire in him.
Oscar, obviously now he's in jail, he realises how inevitable it was, but despite his vast intellect, he couldn't see it at the time, and that is because entirely of the destructive power of love. You know, and anybody who's been in love, I think, can recognise that the potential damage that can be done is just as great as the potential wonderful things, and it's just a reflection, I think, a reflection of that within the human condition.
Coming back as someone in the community now, it's very interesting. You have a different perspective entering these establishments, not as a person who's incarcerated, just as a like a voyeur. It's very interesting now, bringing back the smells, the sights, the moods and stuff.
Very often read about people from the past, and you can maybe visit their grave, or you can maybe, I don't know, go to a theatre that they performed in, but to actually go somewhere where someone had a really horrible time and was imprisoned for something that is now legal is really affecting, and to actually be in this confined space where they themselves would have been confined makes you feel in some ways closer to the reality of what they would have experienced.
This is a 1 in a million opportunity to be with an artist inside the place where he was at his most introspective and his most emotional and his most articulate, artistically, personally articulate, his most vulnerable. So in many ways, the venue is becoming the man. I'm inside Oscar Wilde.
I have had here to look at my past face to face. Well, look at your past face to face. Sit down quietly and consider it. The supreme vice is shallowness. Whatever is realized is right.